very much feels like the calm before the storm, not just because there's been a high wind advisory in the area for 2 straight days, and it's about to hit today and tomorrow here in Happy Valley, but high wind advisory might actually be a pretty good description for what's coming up this week with Penn State football. Fitz and I were just talking about this a little bit before. We're going to be on high alert for transfer portal entries, decisions by players this week. Penn State's season is officially over after they beat Clemson in the Pinstripe Bowl. So we're going to talk about that today. We're not going to skip over that because things that happen deserve our attention and our conversation. So we're going to recap the offense and the defense, what we thought of those things. I'm glad to get Fitz here. He's a little bit under the weather. He's playing injured, but he's here, and I very much appreciate that because Nate is on vacation. And I can do an hour, I guess, by myself, but it's so much more fun to have someone to talk to. So Fitz, welcome. Happy Monday. And officially, it's almost over. The year is almost over, meaning things are just heating up for us with the transfer portal. So how are you doing today with all that said, and how you feeling?
How about that? Nate just, gets done with the Pinstripe Bowl, and he's like, all right, I'm going on vacation. I'm going to see you guys later. So that's very, very Nate of him. I know he took the golf clubs, too, which is actually the part that's got me perturbed. But he's with his family, so there's a trade-off there. So all the best to him in that one. I'm doing okay. Got laid up over the weekend. It was not the Pinstripe Bowl experience that I expected. For those of you with children or without children who have had norovirus, it's not great. 0 stars if you're going to talk about how fun that is. But yeah, it was a long weekend here. But I think I'm on the come up, so that's good. We got and I got to be sharp because you got to head on. It's head on a swivel time, right? It's time for Penn State players to face the ultimate reality of this situation, and that a lot of these guys have been looking at hitting the portal, of course, which does not open until January 2nd officially. So this is all intentions at this point. They've been looking at this situation and exploring their options, and it's going to be wild, I think. I think it's going to be a situation where you see a name and you're like, man, this guy just caught a couple balls the other day. This guy was just, blocking for me the other, there's a lot that's going to go on that I think it's a bit foreign. Penn State fans a bit insulated from all this stuff because 12 years of continuity and a coaching staff kind of cuts down on some of this stuff. I remember the year that Zach McPherson and Lamont Wade went in the portal and he came back, just like that first little mountain that Penn State climbed in the portal was shocking to a lot of folks. And I think you're going to see just a bigger fallout here. And I think it's completely natural. Coaching changes happen all over the country and sort of roster flips are commonplace now. And that's just a new reality of this situation. I like it, but it's just the reality of the situation. So it's going to be a long couple of days, I feel. It's going to be a busy few weeks of visitors, eventually visitors. They can't visit until I think January 1st is the actual first time they can visit, but January 2nd. And that weekend is going to be busy, but there's going to be a lot going on. So I do recommend checking out BlueWhiteIllustrated.com. I recommend checking out everything that we do with the written word, as archaic as that sounds. It's some good stuff. So join us. There's a lot to happen.
Yeah, it's also the most efficient way of getting information to people because this whole production takes some time and it takes some setup. So best way for you to get the information as quickly as possible is at BlueWhiteIllustrated.com. We'll be following along here on the YouTube channel as well when big things happen. If any significant names go into the portal, any significant names exit the portal to Penn State, of course, this coming weekend. We're going to be talking about all of that. But in that context, I started the postgame show this way. And I think you kind of opened the door for this conversation to start about the Pinstripe Bowl. Give credit to Terry Smith for truly keeping this team together through the bowl season and getting a lot of those guys to buy in and play well in that game. And to really, I think, finish the season and not have guys go to the portal early, which there were some, again, let's be clear, some of those guys that you would have expected to play and start did do that, in the secondary. And that's, part of the conversation we're going to get into when we talk about Penn State versus Clemson. But I thought, the game itself and that particular strand of stability at Penn State, Terry Smith maintained that until the very end, which was on Saturday, and with a win. Clearly, I don't normally say this, Penn State wanted to play in that game. I don't know that Clemson was as psyched to play in the Pinstripe Bowl based on especially some of the things I saw in the third and fourth quarter from that Clemson team. Guys technically running routes is what I would call some of those routes in the fourth quarter. Let's get into it. Let's talk about the offense. Let's start with the offense. Penn State wins 22-10. They scored 6 points through 3 quarters and then added 3 at the start of the fourth quarter. So 9 points through 3 quarters, and then they put in, they poured gas on late with the way the game ended. Want to get your thoughts about how the offense performed in what I call the complete performance in my film analysis, but it didn't feel like it for most of the game.
Well, it was, a complete performance. It's always good to do it at the end, right? It's always good to finish strong. It's always good to, you think about the Oregon game, and I don't think we understood how disastrous those first 3 quarters were, even though we said they were pretty disastrous, but you come back and you score 14 points in the fourth quarter. It's like, maybe this will be, maybe the corner has turned. Penn State offense, of course, hampered by several things, not as hampered by the weather as Clemson, who played absolutely terrified of the cold. I mean, you saw that every time they went to catch a ball, every time they went to brace themselves to get hit, they played scared of the cold, and that really played into Penn State's hands and really benefited them, especially for a time that Penn State struggled to get its footing. Early in the game, not being able to punch the ball in after one of the funniest fake punts I could ever imagine. Like that was, and it wasn't so much the call, it wasn't so much the execution.
Yeah.
It was the intended receiver covering the ball as if it were a punt. Was just chef's kiss there. But you look at Penn State's offense playing without several offensive linemen, and that was my concern going in was, yes, Clemson's down several defensive linemen, but if you're playing a game on paper, if you will, and you are replacing offensive linemen versus replacing defensive linemen, programs like this is going to be easier in a one game sample size to be more aggressive on the defensive line because you're going forward. Right. This is not a situation this is like playing offensive line and being dropped into that is incredibly difficult. It would probably only be more difficult if you were a quarterback or a cornerback because you don't know what's coming from the other side. And I think those guys held up well. I gave Dom Rowley my game ball because that is incredibly hard to do. And he graded out pretty well. Like I thought he would do okay. I thought he would do I thought, he would handle everything, and I thought he would be able to hold up. But it was really impressive to see a guy step in there with no experience, no real experience. Like he's been in there. He's been the heartbeat of the offensive line. I believe they called him in the past, an awesome teammate, everything like that. But there's a difference between being an awesome teammate and being a leader and being a guy that can be aggressive, being
athletic enough and to have the size and power to play the position.
Yeah, and he's not a big guy at all. And it was impressive, and it's it was not a drop off at all from the regular season, which is another story in itself. But very impressed with those guys. I know Egan Boyer didn't grade out well, but I loved what I saw from some of him. He looks like a primetime offensive tackle in the future, which is kind of how we've labeled him. He wasn't there yet, but got a glimpse of that. He wasn't quite Olu in the Outback Bowl a couple years ago, but
he's still a little bit underbaked. Another year in the weight room is absolutely going to help him out. The athleticism, the movement skills are there. He just had a hard time a couple of times staying on blocks and maintaining that through contact.
And losing essentially an offseason, he had an upper body injury in the spring, which is not going to help when you're an offensive lineman who has to lift weights to get bigger. And it's not great for you. So I think that matters. We'll see if Penn State can keep him around. He's from North Carolina. So if you're looking at this whole portal formula, if you're the further you are from Penn State growing up and all that stuff, probably more likely to head out. So, I was just impressed with the offensive line, not because they were overwhelming or dominant or anything like that, but because they really played as a unit, and they, you kind of stuck together and pulled it all together without 4 familiar faces there.
They did a much better job in the second half as well. So I thought, maybe a little bit shaky to start. In general, I think the offense was a little bit out of sync in the first half, but then after halftime, they came back and I think were the reason Penn State was able to win the game was they had that balance. Ethan Grunkemeyer in the chat, online, social media. He's the star of the game from his performance, and rightfully so, but he also had a pocket to throw from, which he didn't necessarily have in the first half. Even Anthony Donko gave up a pressure and a quarterback hit in the first half that kind of affected the rhythm of the offense. And to me, that was the really impressive thing was, let's just dive into the quarterback conversation. Ethan Grunkemeyer in that game, I thought was a fully formed quarterback. They allowed him to operate a full playbook. One of my biggest criticisms, or not even a criticism, just pointing out a fact about the offense was in the regular season, it was highly tailored. He was throwing into play action windows. He wasn't necessarily doing full field reads, and he was struggling under pressure and in full field read situations where he would nail it sometimes, and then he would be hot and cold. So this is his performance without play action against Clemson, which was the majority of his diet. Now, they still used a heavy bit of play action, but he was 13 of 21 passing without play action, and 85% adjusted completion percentage with with 4 drops and one time where he was hit his thrown, 183 yards, 2 touchdowns, and a big time throw. He was a fully formed quarterback in that game and showed a lot of the things, progression from the end of the season through this game. He worked on those mistakes that he was making. He mastered some of those things. And for me, like the things I wanted to see from him, he didn't just do them. He did them really well in this game.
Yeah. I mean, we're talking the silver lining of the Drew injury is to get this extended audition for Ethan.
Yeah.
And he did wonderful, I thought, and it was interesting to watch him play to the conditions. I mean, it was not as windy as SMU last year at the home playoff game, but it was a similar type game. Guys that were, not as sharp in their cuts and not as fast to the ball because of the conditions. Yep. And Grunkemeyer played through that. Drew really didn't do that last year in the SMU game. They kind of, sat on the ball. They got those early pick sixes and they got the early lead, which changes them things, especially when you're at a 6-3 game at halftime in the Pinstripe Bowl. But you saw them really not cave to the conditions, and I think that is a very good thing for Mr. Grunkemeyer moving forward. So I was impressed by him. Some good throws. Still, I know you're going to miss Andy and his reverse passes and everything like that. But Grunkemeyer definitely a really bright spot for Penn State. He really helped himself out. Nate and I have had this conversation probably 3 times since the game the other day. A lot of people want to say this guy made money on Saturday, and I think that is incredibly overblown. Grunkemeyer may be the exception. Grunkemeyer did some things that could really help him moving forward because a 6-game sample size is not everything. And there's good and bad in that. And you see a game like that against a reputable coaching staff and Dabo Swinney's coaching staff. And I think that's going to help him out in terms of being able to negotiate with Penn State, being able to negotiate, on the open market and things like that. So I think that's really, I don't want to say the only guy that made himself some money on Saturday, but that conversation is overblown. Grunkemeyer kind of puts a dent in it.
And I wanted to, man, we're in lockstep today. The thing I wanted to discuss here is following up on something we talked about on the post-game show. You mentioned a 6-game sample size, which is not big. 7 games is not a huge sample size for a quarterback, and you've got to make some decisions if you're Penn State, and you got to make some decisions about him if you're another program that's going to pursue him. And I know fans are already bought in on, there's a certain percentage of fans that don't need to hear anything else. They already see with their eyes that he's the guy. But sometimes the progression narrative is true, right? So getting better week to week to week. And here is and again, just a shortcut here for the conversation for Ethan Grunkemeyer, PFF passing grade by week. And you can see very literally the line goes up through the final 3 games of the season where, Indiana, Ohio State, he has 2 of his worst games. The part that I think is important to me is that week 12 game against Michigan State, because you could also split this into Nebraska and Rutgers to end the season. But Michigan State, he wasn't great in that game. He struggled greatly in that game. It made me a little bit nervous about okay, is everything I thought about him not true, or is this just his first start against a team that's doing a bunch of different things? And you can see the linear progression as he gets better through the end of the season, capped by what we just described as a full-fledged quarterback performance where he's reading the defense. He's got full field reads. and was really good under pressure. Another one that I want to bring up here is that his passing under pressure. I put up a clip on social media of one play where the receivers both think they're the screen guy and nobody's blocking. So he just has to like dirt the ball, but he dirts the ball in a completion to Andrew Rappelier. So under pressure, he was 10 of 6 or 6 of 10. Now only 32 yards, but didn't take a lot of sacks and was able to keep the offense on schedule. So when he was blitzed, when he was, under pressure, he performed far above expectations for a normal quarterback, and like categorically different from where he was in the regular season.
Yeah, there's a question here. There's a question in the chat about how valid is the upward trajectory narrative based on the opposing teams. I think that's fair with who he played. But also, you're talking about ball placement. You're talking about decision making. And yes, the defense will play into that because that is their scheme. That is everything. But he did everything that you wanted to see him do. And without being a wordsmith like my colleague here, there was a chance for him to fall flat on his face in this situation because we've seen quarterbacks fall flat on their faces in this situation. He flatly did not do that. Like, he did a really good job gathering himself, especially against 3 really good defenses to start the stretch that he started, turn it around and really, elevated himself. And I think it's just more about like, yes, there's ratings, there's stats and everything like that, but just, I think the eye test was very favorable to Grunkemeyer down the stretch.
And that's why I wanted to start with the areas where he struggled and how he progressed in those areas. Because again, Michigan State is a terrible defense and he didn't play well. And then the confidence that he showed. Here's the other thing, Fitz, is I liked his on-field demeanor as well. Like, he's a soft-spoken guy when you talk to him, but he had that kind of edge to him when he played football. And again, these are things that I spent a lot of time watching him in high school and trying to understand not just like, hey, is he X, Y, or Z, but like, what's his personality like? What are the things he likes to do? What are the underlying things that aren't going to change when he gets to college football? And a lot of those things started to show up in these games. And one of them was, I think, I hate to use the word swagger, Fitz, but I don't know a better word for it, of the confidence and the, like, how you celebrate after a play kind of tells me something about you. Like, Trace had his home run swing. Grunk kind of had that vibe to me of a guy afterwards who had a little bit of that cocky edge to him. It's like, yeah, I know I'm good. And, that is important for a quarterback, to trust in their arm and to trust in their abilities to throw it into tight windows, to throw it up to Andrew Rappelier along the sideline on a play that was awesome but called back. So, like, this is all leading to what people are asking in the chat of, like, are they going to keep Ethan Grunkemeyer? I mean, it changed my opinion of the math here, the calculus of, like, should they take a risk? Should they not take a risk? I really liked what I saw from him because he worked on some of those weaknesses and he showed some of these things. Am I a prisoner of the moment here, Fitz? Because I'm terrified of being a prisoner of the moment, but I also see, like I said, I see everything I wanted to see.
Yeah, you're a little bit prisoner of the moment, but we all are, right? I mean, I think that when you look at I don't want to say stability, but the continuity of 3 years of starting Drew, and I think the fatigue had started to set in by then, especially for someone that reviews as much of the tape and saw as many of the throws as you did that were like, right there,
Yeah.
For him to come in and make those throws. And again, it's also important to know he didn't make every throw, which this is college football. It's an imperfect game. You can't expect him to make every throw, but he definitely made the ones that he needed to, and the ones that, you would like to see him complete on a regular basis. And some of those checkdowns, some of those prior to this game decisions to run and things like that, I think are all very, very positive indicators that this can be a successful quarterback in college football. He's got the physical skills. He's got the arm. He's got the texture to go with the arm. That is one thing that you look at that, Drew sometimes struggled with. And, a couple of the throwaways were good football plays. Like, you hate to see incompletions, but some of those are good football plays. And he's got some legitimate connections with guys on that team, like Rappelier, who's, is budding into a star, finally over that knee injury, and has done some really good things. So I think the command and everything is great. I do caution to take too much away from it as we, spent 10 minutes already talking about him because it is a smaller sample size in the grand scheme of things. But you have to like what you see, right? Like there's no getting around that this kid has come in. He did not fold against a tremendous schedule to start. He was okay. And then he took his game to the next level, which is kind of what you expect to see from a young quarterback. And when you compare these guys, we kind of lose the forest for the trees sometimes. He's a redshirt freshman still. Like he's a really young guy. He's got 3 years left to play and 3 high potential years left to play. And again, just did not run into a wall. How many quarterbacks do we see in the portal right now that, had some promising starts and then ran into a wall because they didn't have the transferable skills from year 1 to year 3? I think he's got that.
My one last point about this, and then we'll get on to something else, is that I think it's fair to say like the defenses that he faced at the end of the season. And again, that's why I'm asking Fitz, like, hey, am I prisoner of the moment here? Because those defenses were easier to attack than the ones to begin the season. But here's a good example of what I'm talking about from the aggression and the intelligence. So it is an easier defense to understand when you're going up against Tom Allen. It's the same problem that was at Penn State of he's probably going to play man coverage on third down. You can roll the dice, and most times he's going to come up press man on 3rd and 8 or longer. But in certain situations, they didn't. In a 2-minute drive, they were playing cover 2. And in situations like that, I've seen so many quarterbacks, including the one that was under center previously. In cover 2, you a lot of times will go to one particular look, which is to attack the safety in the corner to one side of the field where you're trying to hit the intermediate pass in between those two down the field. But it's a choice. It's a high-low choice, a guy in the flat and a guy down the field. And so many times quarterbacks are afraid to make that throw because if they don't put the right trajectory and zip on the ball, the corner can undercut it and intercept it. And Grunk just bang into that hole every single time down the stretch. One of them was dropped. One of them Kobe Howard caught. Like, it was really impressive. And he'd done that previously against Rutgers and a couple other situations where he's just confident to take that more aggressive throw. And so many quarterbacks are like, I don't want to be wrong. I don't want to make a mistake. So they just wait until the corner drops back, and then they get the permission to throw the check down.
He also had the liberty of not having the, I don't want to say expectations, but the downside. Like going 5-7 doesn't matter as much as you don't have the ramifications if you do throw that interception. So like I think that's fair to throw into the conversation as well. So but is that up here? Is that ingrained in his overall game? Is that going to game 1 next year if he's at Penn State, if he's wherever he's at? Is that part of his psyche? Or is that just part of the situation that he was in? I think that's fair to bring up.
Let's have a palate cleanser. There's still some things to talk about on the offense, but we need to talk about beer for a second. It's the holiday season, especially if you're on vacation. There's no too early to go have a beer. Now, I don't think Anti-Fragile is open today, but tell everybody about Anti-Fragile Brewing Company.
Yeah, I think that you look at all the places you could go in State College for a beer. I actually wanted to get back when I got back to town after Christmas to get down there. Unfortunately, my digestive system had other plans, but nothing to do with Anti-Fragile Brewing there. Nate would have just would have been ashamed of me for saying that. But the best beer in State College is an Anti-Fragile in East Calder Way. If you are in town over the holiday, check it out. I don't have the hours up right now, but I know they will be up at the end of the week to celebrate the new year, to celebrate the dawning of a new age, the Matt Campbell era at Penn State. If you're in town, I do recommend checking them out. It's a really chill spot to grab a beer, to grab a cocktail, to grab a kombucha, to grab a cheesesteak, to have a conversation, which is of course a lost art in this society. So if you're in town, reminiscing or bringing maybe kids back for the spring semester, I do recommend checking out Anti-Fragile Brewing. They have been wonderful to us as a sponsor, and conversely, I think our readers, listeners, and viewers have been wonderful to them. So continue to support them. They are continuing with us as a sponsor, and we really appreciate that. So definitely check out Anti-Fragile when you can.
Yeah, and especially in the off season, if you're down there and you want to go in and say hi, make sure you mention the Blue White Illustrated YouTube channel and BWI Live that we sent you there. Helps us out, and it helps them out, and we love the relationship, and we just want to make sure that we're rewarding them with their trust in us as the people spreading the message. Let's talk about Quentin Martin now. Let's talk about just the running backs, the offense, the skill positions outside of quarterback and offensive line. Receivers kind of feel a little bit like an afterthought in this game, despite Trevor Pena, mostly because they're seniors, right? And people are like, oh, that was great. What about Kobe Howard for the future? What about where was Tysier Denmark? We got to see Quentin Martin in an extended period of time. What did you think of Quentin?
I thought it was good. It was. I don't want to get ahead of my skis here, but he's a talented guy. He's, of course, a different style running back than we've seen. And he got the same kind of treatment, the same kind of opportunity that Corey Smith did, and he just did a lot more with it. You know, you look at him as a prospect, and you thought that slash running back receiver type guy, but he did some inside running this week, and it was pretty impressive. I will say the turf conditions and the frozenness of it all probably helped him out a little bit. His cuts were good, not as decisive as you would probably see on a clean field, and not as decisive as you probably need on a clean field. But he finished runs very well. He did some good things. It was funny. His first carry came as a fullback. He did that fullback dive that they implemented there at the end of the season, and did not go well. And from there he really took off. Found some space, and just a guy I think just can naturally find space. You talk about that. Yes, it's a 3rd and 18, 3rd and 19 where he takes a draw and goes, I think 15, 16 yards. And yes, the defense was sitting back. Tom Allen's defense, as you mentioned, probably playing man down the field and trying to put a cap on things. But you saw some of that natural ability to just just kind of get away from people. He set up his
blocks well.
Yeah, he set up his blocks. He was elusive. I think setting up the blocks, the field conditions played into that as well. It forced him to be patient, and he did it in with great style. So I was really, really impressed with Quentin Martin. Is he the running back one of the future? I think that still remains to be seen. Again, I don't want to take too much from this game because of what it was and because of what they were facing and what they were working with. But yeah, you have to look at this on an even playing field between him and Corey Smith, and Quentin Martin certainly won the day.
Yeah, I mean, they went with as far as I can understand, they went with a hot hand. I don't know if Corey got banged up in the first half or not, but it didn't seem like it. We just saw much more of Quentin and then Tyke Hayes late in the game, who also looked pretty good. You
saw Corey with what you were afraid of, really, is that as a guy with that size and a guy with that speed and pedigree of he's a high school running back that can run away from people, and you saw him just try and bounce and bounce and bounce. Yep. And that, unfortunately, you learn that doesn't work in the college game. And because of it, Quentin Martin's his inside runs and Tyke Hayes, a limited sample size, plus a little bit of pass protection in there. And by the way, Corey had a great blitz pickup as well. Was probably more impressed with the pass protection than I expected to be, because you bring in guys that are very green, that have not seen the field at all. And to ask them to do that, whether it's against Clemson's first D-line, second D-line, whatever, doesn't really matter, because they were able to step in the way and give Grunkemeyer some more time. We talked about that pocket before. Just the protection was pretty impressive.
By the way, if you're watching the video here, please like the video, subscribe here to the Blue White Illustrated YouTube channel. Plenty of stuff coming up. I know we're here on a Monday. We're not normally here on a Monday, and there's a good number of people, I think, that are just catching us. I did my best, Fitz. One of the worst things I am is that promotion of being like reminding people of the schedule, because I barely know the schedule for anything, and even if I'm the one creating the schedule.
Well, good news, because good news on promotion. Because did you hear my ad read? That was the worst, probably the worst one I've ever done. So sorry to John and Anti-Fragile. But I upped you on that one. So I just wanted to make you look good on that one.
So all I'm saying is like the video, subscribe here to the Blue White Illustrated YouTube channel as usual. People in the chat always helping us out, and I appreciate it. Even gives me the reminder to remind people on the show while we're here live on air. I thought, getting back to Quentin Martin, there's definitely a lot of potential there, and one of the things about him over the years has been, is he a natural running back? And I think you pointed out very, very well, he does have those instincts to be a good running back, to set up the vision. And, the things that I noticed watching on film is he had a good understanding of the play based on his reaction. So Clemson blitzes to the front side of a run, he's immediately hitting the backside B gap. He's not surprised by that. And that's those are the examples of seeing a young guy in this situation, because there was a lot of predetermined, these guys are already fully baked when it comes to Katron Allen and Nick Singleton. But seeing Tyke Hayes and seeing Quentin Martin, I think, have good vision and good understanding of what's going on in front of them. it was a good example of what Stan Drayton was trying to accomplish with these running backs at Penn State. So just a further example of what it meant by like learning football and how that worked out, that just having a good understanding of what the play is helps accentuate your natural instincts and your natural abilities. I think wherever he goes, like that is going to help those two young guys to have that kind of understanding. And the last thing I guess I'll say about some of these young guys on offense is, as much as it was good for us to see this, I think that's the biggest takeaway, is that we get to see some of these things. Penn State has a pretty good understanding based on their film of practice and seeing what they've seen from them for a while now. So the staff probably not surprised by a lot of these performances from either good or bad from the offense, and especially, the defense as well.
That's just it. You just don't know, right? You think about all the guys that have come through Penn State as essentially, for lack of a better term, I'm not saying this is Martin, I'm not saying this is anybody that stood out, not great practice players. There's a reason that Zach Zwinak was buried as like the 5th running back that year, because he was not a good practice player. And you don't know it until you get in the game, but you don't want to take that risk of putting them in the game if they're not good in practice, right? Usually, if you're not good in practice, it does not translate to the game. And on top of that, you just didn't have those opportunities. I mean, this is not a situation where Quentin Martin should have been starting over Katron Allen or Nick Singleton, either of those guys. And I know it's very, very interesting that Martin had a 100-yard game and Singleton did not this year. Like, that is crazy to me. That was anyway. And Singleton, I know he's a receiver and all that kind of stuff, but it's just a crazy stat when you think about all the yards that Nick Singleton ran for as a running back, like getting a handoff and going at Penn State. Did not have a 100-yard game this year. Quentin Martin had it in one showing. And it doesn't matter. Like, it's completely irrelevant. It's a stat that is, just kind of thrown out there just as a, wow, that's pretty crazy, but it doesn't matter. So there's no element of these guys should have been playing over the first guys, especially Katron, with the way that he played this season. But there is always that kind of feeling vaulting forward of, hey, what is the situation going to be when these guys clear out? And you got an extra game. You got a game of that. And that's kind of the beauty of these bowls now. And I understand the hand wringing on opt-outs and everything like that, but you get 13 of these a year, right? You get 13 opportunities to watch. And one of these games is usually going to be just a different game, right? A different atmosphere, whether it's a playoff game where everybody's all in, or the complete opposite, which was the Pinstripe Bowl on Saturday. It's all about your mindset, opening up, having fun with it. And we're having fun talking about Ethan Grunkemeyer, who started 7 games, Quentin Martin, who never started, he still has not started a game, Dom Ruley, who's an awesome story and, led the offensive line that had 4 new starters. And then we're going to switch to defense at some point and talk about the guys that really stepped up in that area. So if you can open your mind to get past the whole bowls are evil because players don't play and they have no loyalty, whatever, we're not wasting
This is a good replacement for spring games, because if those start to go extinct and we have bowl games, I don't mind. Like, it's a better full contact version of a spring game, which it does still matter to the players playing, for one reason or another.
Yeah, it's fun, right? It's football. Like, it's like that's the root of this, right? It's like, hey, I like watching Penn State football, not all the time, but I like watching Penn State football because that's what I was raised to do. And this is kind of it's the opportunity that you make of it. I think that seeing these guys, talking about these guys and talking about their potential futures, talking about the making the most of their opportunity, because, hey, Corey Smith started the game the other day. He did not finish the game. Quentin Martin harnessed that opportunity. He had he had some holes to run through, and he made the most of them. And that's fun, right? That's why we do this. That's I don't want to say transactional nature, but when you're in college, you get 4 years. You get, 5 years to play 4. Some guys stay 3. So all these names are going to continuously cycling. So this is the fun part to me. This is the discovering Olu in the Outback Bowl. This is the thing where you vault forward to next year. Unfortunately, with the portal, there's going to be some guys that you saw this weekend, including guys that we've already talked about here, that are going to be playing other places next year. But that's fun, right? That last part was a bit
maybe not
cheek.
But it's the part that everyone was waiting for all year, which is to unwrap their presence of, hey, young guys are fun because they haven't disappointed you yet. You don't know exactly, so there's always upside. There's always potential. We are going to get into the defense here in just one second, but something that I'm really proud that we're part of an organization that will help out its own. not a great situation to be in, but Fitz, can you fill us in a little bit more on Celtics GoFundMe page?
Yeah, Celts, if you've been following the show or if you've been following the boards for the last 20 years, Celts, he's our guy over at Blue White Illustrated. He was with me when I was at Blue White Illustrated as an intern the first time. Like that's how far back we go. Just one of the best dudes you've ever met. And if you ever come to a tailgate, Celts has greeted you, shook your hand, talked to you about Penn State football, and really, really made you feel welcome. And we want to make him feel as good as he can. Of course, recent cancer diagnosis, which absolutely sucks because it impacts good people, and it's really this is one of the top guys. So we do have the link for Celtics GoFundMe, and if you are able to give, we would really appreciate it because he's a guy that's worth giving to. So I appreciate T Frank giving us the time and the platform here to spread that word because he's an awesome dude and he certainly deserves it.
Yeah, I'm looking for the link. I'll put it in the chat, and then I'll put it in the show notes, and of course on the replay as a comment on the bottom of the video, the pinned comment, if you want to donate, because cancer is one of the scariest words that can be said to you in a sentence, and the realities of it are just as difficult as the emotion of life doesn't stop when you have cancer. You have to figure out how to have a life and how to live in those situations while trying to fight for your life. So we want to help him out with that. And if you can donate, every little bit helps. And I've been following along with this. I'm really proud of the people in our community for stepping up and for helping Celts. The number, and again, it's here in the chat. I'll leave it at that. But I'm just really, I'm happy for the outpouring of support that we have from our community.
Yeah, hate that we have to do it, but glad that we have people that are supportive of that. So.
Let's talk about the defense now and talk about how I was surprised. The most surprising thing for me in this game was that Clemson came in with their offensive line and their quarterback, and the Penn State defense shut them down. I did a speed run of the defensive film this morning to get a better sense of what went on. And not only did they do that, Clemson's plan of attack was surprising. I'll get into my thoughts in a second, but I want you to go first. What were your thoughts of the Penn State defensive performance and how they limited a senior quarterback in his final game to 10 points and like 50% completion percentage of the game?
Yeah, and that completion percentage marred by drops. I think both sides had multiple drops because of the weather. You're looking at a situation, T. Frank, you might be too young for this, but the 2010 Citrus Bowl against LSU was played in a downpour. I don't know if you remember that one or not, but it was a situation where LSU clearly had the talent and speed advantage, and the weather just completely negated that. And yeah. I think that regardless of what Clemson had or did not have, they didn't have Antonio Williams, who, by the way, is one of the best receivers in the ACC, potentially in the country. I loved him as a prospect coming out. He was really, really good. They did not have their top guys there, but at the same time, they were in a similar situation to Penn State. Penn State was able to keep a lid on it. Penn State was able to change their defense enough to play more of a Manny style under Anthony Poindexter and play more
aggressive.
Yeah, more aggressive. So, yes, more aggressive, but allowed their defensive linemen maybe to do a little bit more than we saw with Jim Knowles this year, which is the big criticism here is you had guys like Nittany and you had guys like Zane Durant that we've seen it. Like we have tangible evidence that they can be different players than they were for most of this year. Certainly credit to Nittany. But you're looking at a defense that allowed them to maybe do a little bit more. I thought Alonzo Ford did some good things. I thought Xavier Gilliam did some good things before he went out injured. But they were able to fill in with guys like Owen Wafel and Ty Blanding did some good things there. So just Penn State's entire defensive effort, top to bottom, starting with Poindexter all the way back to King Mack wearing number 9, which really freaks some people out. It's great for me because I got about 30 message board posts telling people that it was King Mack, and developed into a pretty fun shtick there on the board. But no, really did a nice job of being a fundamental defense and doing some really good things to put Clemson in bad spots. Now, the drop on the first drive of the game certainly helps Penn State. Those things are great. Those breaks are great. But at the same time, fundamentally sound, they tackled well, and they did some really, really positive, like fundamental football things, which is really what you've been longing for a long time.
It seemed like they simplified some things. They used similar structures to what Jim Knowles had been using. So it wasn't like they completely retooled the defense in a month, but it was very clear to me that they were operating at a higher level of communication and football IQ than they had in the past, the secondary in particular. That was, to me, the most interesting thing was I went in, I kind of felt like, did Clemson not watch any film on this defense? Because they did not really try to run the ball until the third quarter. And by the time they got the ball back, after that first drive of the third quarter, they're down. Game situation dictates they got to start throwing again. And to me, it seemed like they really wanted to test the young secondary, having all those young guys, Dejon Lane out there, having Darius Dixon, and King Mack and those guys rotating at that Zakee Wheatley position. Vabu Torre coming into the game as well. And it backfired in a big way. Not only was it the drops, but they did try to throw the ball down the field quite a bit in this game. It felt like a dink and dunk passing attack, and maybe it was early, but they tried to be aggressive as the game went on. They threw a lot with their senior quarterback, and there just wasn't anybody open. The communication and the sticky coverage from guys like Jameer Joseph and Darius Dixon obviously had a very good game from a pass breakup perspective, was really good. But the guy that I thought played best upon further review, really watching how he performed, was Dejon Lane. The tackling in this game,
you got me.
That was gonna
be my moment, but okay, you got me there. No, and that was
expound on it then.
That was the guy that I was looking forward to seeing the most. Just based off of what we understood in terms of the key opting out, and Antoine Belgic-Shorter has been hurt for a month now. Seeing Dejon Lane get that opportunity, and it's the fastest we've seen him play, right? Like and then we say that on a frozen ground in terrible weather, which is a great sign, because we've always wanted to see him play fast, because he is fast. He is a freakish athlete there in the back, but always limited by, for lack
hesitation.
of thinking, right?
Yes.
Always limited by thinking about what his next step needs to be versus what his instincts tell him to do. And sometimes instincts burn you. But when you're playing against a team that's playing on its heels, basically, and frankly, Cade Klubnik's not very good.
He didn't play well. Yeah.
But that's been all year. Like, there's a lot of parallels there with Drew in terms of like how the Clemson fan base feels about him. Hey, good soldier, tip your hat, all that stuff, but ready to move on. But you're looking at a guy like Dejon Lane, who has an opportunity in a defense where you're not being asked to do every single calculation along the way, which safety is incredibly hard in Jim Knowles' defense. Safety is more free in Manny's defense, Tom Allen's defense. So, there's a lot that goes on there from a processing perspective, but at the same time, Dejon Lane did a really good job. Vabu Torre, while we're on safeties, did a really good job. And he's always been a guy that I've thought maybe an oversized safety that could be a linebacker eventually because of his physical abilities. He showed his physical nature in that game. I think he had 7 tackles, and he seemed to be around the football quite a bit. So maybe he's one of those guys you feed more reps to, and as he gets more reps, all of a sudden develops faster, because that is a thing. When you get out in the game, you kind of settle in, and you feel okay about that. So I think the safety play for Penn State, not really challenged deep. They did throw the ball down the field a couple of times, but not really challenged in the sense of like, you have to go make.
Well, they took it away. That's the thing, is they took it away in a they played a lot of cover 6, and I think that might have been an adjustment from what they were doing in the regular season, where they weren't playing as much of those combo coverages. But like, they were doing a couple of things that were a little unorthodox, but their communication, their pass offs in zone, there wasn't anything open deep, and those safeties were a big part of that. The interesting thing is, in that 3 safety system, I think there is a world where a guy like Vabu Torre, who has that sort of profile you just talked about, excuse me.
We're great at talking today.
Can fit into, like just the amount of weird things I've had to bounce between high school film and this and the portal and all this stuff in the last couple of days. The words are getting dyslexic in my head. You can play that guy in this defense, because the way it works is now he's really just in the boundary. There's a tighter window for him to cover, and he can be more of that traditional run box defender, splitting that role with the middle field safety, if that's what they continue to do. And I would expect that that's probably what they continue to do under Matt Campbell. I think those safeties, obviously you want to keep as many players as you can. It feels like that's one, though, where there's a little bit of there's a lot of Iowa State secondary players in the portal, and this is maybe a good chance to transition into the conversation about what happens next. But any final thoughts here about the defense before we get to that?
Yeah, let's quick hitter this. Darius Dixon, Jameer Joseph, I think are going to be really good players. If Penn State can keep them, which would be really great, if they could keep them because they're very good. Excuse me, denied Dennis-Sutton, we really haven't talked about. And then we should probably carve out a few minutes here because we talked about a couple of weeks ago about the Jesse Luketa in the Outback Bowl situation where that guy found his way into the draft and onto a roster by doing whatever he needed to do. And I have no issue with guys opting out because that is their decision. That is their choice. Football is hard. Losing football sucks, and the season's been very long. But on the flip side, I do commend those that stick it out. And every once in a while, you get one of those guys that does that, doesn't get hurt, and stands out. Luketa did a really good job in the Outback Bowl. Denai kind of blew that away with his performance on Saturday. It was Saturday, right? Yeah. So he's got the arrow pointing back up, and it's going to be a lot about how he tests because he's a physical freak in the sense that you look at him and you're like, man, that guy is just incredibly put together. But he's not going to go out there and run a 4.4. He's not the twitched up guy that Abdul Carter was, and I think that's Abdul and Chop did a disservice unintentionally to Denai because they're different kinds of defensive ends, right? But still, Denai was able to showcase his skills, not just rushing the passer, but getting out in space and I don't want to say creating havoc, but making plays on the edge. There were a couple times he just grabbed a dude by his shoulder pads and threw him to the ground. I mean, that was some pretty impressive strength there. And that's what he is at the next level, I think. Is he a 3-4 end? He could be a 4-3 end as well, but he's going to be a guy that I think excels in the NFL because he's got that NFL body already. And when you take a step up, when you are big and you step into a game that's already full of big players, you've got an advantage because you don't have to learn as much in that aspect. So hats off to Denai. He's always been an awesome representative for Penn State. I know people, Steven, don't like his celebrations. Get over it. They're having fun out there. And I would rather see celebrations than hands on the helmet because they missed a play. So it's been fun to watch. He is, again, from the time I started covering him, I thought he was a special guy, and he really showed that out on Saturday. Again, you can commend those guys that do play while just kind of I don't want to say thumbing your nose, but just ignoring the guys that don't play, right? We're going to sit here and talk about the guys that did play, and Denai did play really well. And I think there's certainly something to be said for that.
Well said. We have a chat donation here, and normally I like to introduce the person and say thank you and I do comment on these things, but I am ill-equipped to say who this is. M6U are the only letters and characters I understand here from this, other than the comment. So this person says, I hate to think this, but I cannot stop thinking that Allar is following the path of Hackenberg. He says, they say, what I mean by that is their first year at QB is their best year. To me, they're fundamentally different. I understand the narrative of five-star quarterback doesn't live up to the expectation and then goes on to the NFL draft and maybe is drafted in the second round. I don't know where Drew's going to be drafted at this point. Christian Hackenberg had a fundamental accuracy issue. And I know you might say Drew has a fundamental accuracy issue. Drew's issues are not that his feet physically don't work correctly for him to throw the ball accurately. It's the consistency of it, where Hackenberg had something in the way he threw the football that he could not correct that caused him to be wildly inaccurate in a very clear way. Drew's mechanics, his throwing motion, his football IQ, and the fact that he was a positive starter even this year, like in a bad situation, did things to put the team in positions to win, and then ultimately threw passes that ended the game. He was not as terrible as the common consensus is right now. There is still a path for him to be a player in the NFL. And so I don't think that they're comparable in the way they play football, but that is 10 years different in football, right? Like very different game than it was 10 years ago with Christian Hackenberg.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I mean, you look at the parallels between starting out as they did and all the promise and all that kind of stuff, and how that kind of faded away over time. You also look at two guys that were, not to make excuses for them, but in systems that didn't really fit what their skill sets were, and they moved further away from that as time sort of progressed there. You wish you had it over with both of them because of all the physical talent, but sometimes coaches, we fall for physical talent and can't see past it. And I think a lot of that goes back to just how we evaluate quarterbacks all over. And you look at what's in the future for Penn State, and this is moving beyond Allar and well, obviously well beyond Hack. But you look at the mental aspect of things, and you look at a guy like Rocco Beck, and we spent the first, we spent 15 minutes on Grunk, and the chat was all about Rocco Beck. And it's going to be so much about who can handle the mental aspect of all this stuff, right? I was reading or listening to a podcast, and they talk about quarterback. Man, I'm trying to think who that was. Brandon Marshall, I think, who was talking about quarterback, 80% mental, and that's accurate, right? Like it's great that you can throw a football over them mountains. That's wonderful. But you have to be able to process everything. And that's not just reading a defense. That's not just knowing where your receivers are going to be. It is everything. It is reading the cues of your receivers emotionally. It is reading all the things that you think about in that huddle for how is this play going to potentially fail? And how is this play going to be remedied by what I do with the football when it eventually does fail? And I think that we've gotten so far into the robotic quarterback mentality. And I'm not saying that Drew or Hack or anybody like that's a robot, but like the ability to play the fail safe of being able to scramble, being able to make plays with your feet, being able to do some things that we've really actually seen some good stuff from Grunk in the last couple of months. Not so much in the last game, because I think that when you have one quarterback on the roster, it really limits the risk that you will take. He kept the ball on his own read, which was absolutely the right call. And he's like, I'm just going to slide here. It's Yankee Stadium. It's a baseball stadium. I get it. But being able to do those little things to make those decisions goes so much further, especially in the college game. When you've got guys that are not necessarily the best throwers, or not necessarily the best Elite 11 guys. Like you think, and that's the Elite 11 is fantastic. I love those guys, and they do a wonderful job trying to prepare. And that's one thing that they've actually leaned on in the last couple of years is the mental aspect of it, the mental acuity of being a quarterback versus being a guy that can throw the ball like that. That there's been progress in that area.
I spoke to a couple guys here in State College that they have the S2 cognition test go to all the regionals so they can give guys feedback on how their brain processes and works. It's fascinating. I just wanted to underline what you were saying there of how the mental side is absolutely something that there's more and more investigation into at the quarterback position.
Yeah, I mean, it's all about finding the hack, right? Not the Hackenberg, but it's about hacking the position to figure out what is the most productive for you. And I said it before on this show, Penn State tried to recruit the finished product in the sense of they tried to recruit the guy. You look at Beckham Kritza, and I know this is a hot point for everyone, but you recruited the guy that you thought he could be eventually, without the acknowledgement that it's probably not going to happen because of all the intangibles there. So what happens with this next staff, we will see. It's not always about getting the highest rated guy. It's not always about getting the guy early. It's not always about getting the high school guy, right? It's about looking at the transfers as this guy can potentially help us. How many transfer quarterbacks are still in the college football playoff? Quite a bit, I think. That number has not gone down since the first round. So like, quarterback is so important right now. It is the most important position on the field, and it is a beyond blitz mental position that you need to be able to take these guys in, get them beyond the throwing the potential or throwing the throwing the cage drill. Like it's tough to explain if you're not at Penn State's camps, but they've got the shield up there. This is terrible. I've done a really bad job because I'm just thinking about the drill where they throw over it and then they,
Yeah,
you know,
they have a net where you have to. They call it a 6-inch throw. You got to throw over a net. It's simulating getting over a linebacker down
yeah,
into the basket for a receiver.
right, and that's wonderful that you can do that. But it also does not always emulate what you're looking for in making that decision to get to that throw. And I think that has been one of Penn State's biggest detriments. And they've got some smart quarterbacks in there. Like, I'm not saying that these quarterbacks are dummies. I think Grunk's smart. I think Smolik's smart. You've got guys that have. I think Drew's smart too. It's just about being able to translate that to the field and figure out how this all works together to win you college football games instead of winning the draft. And I think that that's been what Matt Campbell's been all about. And I think that's going to be something that's going to be a change. And it's going to be fun to watch. Again, it's fun is in the eye of the beholder. I choose to think it's fun versus thinking the worst.
And just like everything being a calamity. So Z-Man asked this very politely. He says, defensive coordinator intel, please. It's a fair thing. Let's get into this conversation about the transfer portal, the coaching staff here to end the show. As far as I understand, like, the situation has not necessarily changed, but Fitz, you would know better than I. So just in this final portion of the show, defensive coordinator, is it important to have one before the portal opens? And what's the situation that you think, what's going on there as best you can tell us here on a Monday at 10:58?
I thought you were going to ask me if it was important to have a defensive coordinator. Yeah, we'll see. I mean, Penn State had an interim one in the bowl game. It was pretty good. Maybe they'll just, everybody comes together and, does the Disney thing. But anyway, I think that you're still in the same kind of situation that you're at. I think the Danton Lynn stuff is still out there. Nate actually had an update on our board last night with Lynn and with what Penn State's trying to accomplish. Yeah, I do think they want to have something in place, not only for the transfer portal in terms of incoming, but you look at guys like Tony Rojas, Amari Campbell. They would really like to know what kind of system they would potentially be playing if they stayed at Penn State. So I think that that's something that needs to be wrapped up here in the next couple of days. I thought they would have one by the end of the bowl trip. It has not gotten there at this point. But yeah, I mean, Danton is still being bandied about there. I think it's one of those things where, yes, there are options out there, but that's the one that kind of like everybody has sort of focused on. So that's where I'm at with that, without giving away too much of Nate's stuff from last night, because there's hurdles and there's loopholes and there's all that kind of stuff that makes coaching searches fun or coaching changes fun.
It's interesting coming out of this, and this is the final thing about the coaches before we get into maybe some of the portal conversation. Anthony Poindexter's situation is very interesting, and I know everyone wants yesterday to be the final line on his resume to get him the Penn State defensive coordinator job. I don't understand the situation to be like that, but he is an excellent coach, and he is, a safety. Starting with his positional coach, the number of safeties he's brought through and coached that have gone on and played and now starting in the NFL, the number was not high before him, and it is much higher now through his tenure at Penn State. I'm just interested in what his future is going to be. If it's at Penn State, if it's not at Penn State, it would not. Right now, it doesn't seem like it because they have two secondary coaches, if you include Terry Smith on the roster, although we still have said TBD about what Terry's doing in the future. I guess, what do you see as far as like Anthony Poindexter and the situation with him? Is he going to become a hot commodity after this past weekend?
I think he's already a hot commodity. He's got options down Virginia Tech. He's got options Tennessee with Jim Knowles. So I don't think he comes back to Penn State, and that's just reading the cues coming out of the bowl trip just from talking to people. It's a shame because I like Dex a lot, and he would be an asset to whatever staff he's at. But coming off, we talk about guys making money on Saturday. It's probably overstated with Dex as well, but he's still got pretty good options with the way that he's coached over the last 15 years. This is not a one game situation. This is a 15 to 20 year situation. Dex is very, very well respected out there, and he's going to have options.
Yeah. It's been so quiet about him that that was something that piqued my interest as now we're on the other side of that, and we can kind of maybe learn more about the future there. So players that have entered the portal that I think Penn State fans are interested in: safety Marcus Neal, cornerback Joshua Patterson, and quarterback Jontez Williams from Iowa State. Some of these guys, they go into the portal and it makes obvious sense they would join Penn State. But Marcus Neal.
Jaden Woods in the portal. That's interesting.
Jaden Woods in the portal.
Former Penn State commit.
So all these are very...
He's going to get paid. He's going to get paid.
This is why we're doing our tailgate or our free agency show extravaganza on Friday with all these names flying around and all that stuff going on. That actually is what I was just about to say. Some of these guys, like, it makes sense they would join Penn State, but some of these guys probably could go in the portal and start a bunch of different places, and they're going to have a lot of options. So I guess, what are you seeing? You wrote this morning about the number of players in the portal from Iowa State. I imagine some of this is just because their former coaching staff is no longer there, but how are you reading the tea leaves, and what are you interested in with that particular group of players in the portal?
T. Frank, before we get started on that, a question that keeps coming up, what is Penn State's front going to look like next year? Iowa State played a 3-3-5, but we understand differently. You've had some reporting on this, but we still continue to try and feed the masses here. So how does this going to factor into that?
They're going to be playing a 4-down front. Whoever the defense coordinator is, they are not going to be bringing a different front in from Iowa State. A lot of that they did because of necessity, not because they wanted necessarily to play a 3-3-5. So, to my understanding, logically, it doesn't make any sense to do something that is a defense built on necessity. And you're not going to go to Penn State and eliminate the strength of the program, which has been pass rushers over the last decade. So I would not worry about that. We've reported that at BlueWhiteIllustrated.com a couple of times. This is going to be a 4-down front. So don't be concerned that they're bringing the 3-3 stack or any of the Big 12 shenanigans to Penn State.
Do you know how hard it is for Penn State to recruit defensive tackles that are defensive tackles in the Big Ten? It's hard for Iowa State. It's even much harder for Iowa State to recruit defensive tackles. And they've got some big boys. Their Orange was their nose tackle this year. He's about 335, and he was pretty active, pretty good player. He's about as ideal as you could get in that situation. But it's really hard to do that. And they've got guys that are edge guys for them. So they'll be listed as DNs on their roster that are 285, 290 pounds. They'll be D tackles in a 4-down front. So you're looking at that. But such a handsome question for you, because it sort of points to what we're writing about on BlueWhiteIllustrated.com right now. I broke down the Iowa State names to know. There's going to be a bunch of Iowa State guys that end up Penn State. And I think that we sit here and we go through this process and we're not sure what to expect because we haven't been through it before in the Penn State atmosphere. So you think that, first off, you think that Penn State's going to keep more of its guys than it's probably going to keep because you want to believe the loyalty is there. You want to believe that all that is great, and that's wonderful. Yeah. There's going to be a lot of guys that leave. There's going to, like I said, guys that played prominent roles in the bowl game. They're going to go, and that's their prerogative. That is their best course of action. Some of those guys will strike while the iron's hot and get great deals for them and their family. We saw Zariah Fisher earlier this week. We had previously reported that, but a 7th-year guy who's not going to go pro might as well go find the best place that he can make money for his family. His family's been through a lot, and he's been through a lot. So again, commend him for doing what he does best for himself and his family. But yeah, the reality of this situation is I think there's going to be more guys that leave from Penn State, more guys that come in from Iowa State. And you're going to have that conversation about, are these Iowa State guys good enough or not? We will see on the field, I think, eventually. Yeah. But you're also going to understand that Matt Campbell has seen some of these guys for 3 or 4 years. They've got evaluations all throughout practices, all throughout games, all throughout every interaction that they've had with them since going back to their high school days. So he knows these guys really well. And does that mean that he'll probably overrate some of the talent coming from Iowa State? Yes. Does that mean he'll probably underrate some of the talent that's at Penn State right now? Probably, because he hasn't seen as much. But at the same time, they're all going to have to come together and, remember the Titans this shit. So it's going to be a fun come together. Like I said, there's some talent out there. And if you're scraping the top part of that roster, and I wrote about Penn State's interest in offensive prospects coming from Iowa State, and hey, nothing screams offense like Iowa State, right? But there's going to be some good players that are able to come over and that Penn State will recruit, and it's going to fundamentally change some of how those rooms look at Penn State next year.
So I'm specifically going to talk about the offense here, but I did get a look at the defensive starters and depth players. That's kind of a different bag for me. I'm going to go off the things I've seen of them on film. Iowa State is good at identifying athletic talent. Very similar to Penn State's previous staff of being able to find guys that are maybe hidden in the couch cushions. And at Iowa State...
Because they had to, right?
Because they had to. At Penn State, if they identified a guy and they offered him, suddenly all the sharks would swim in and they would all take a bite out of a guy would get a Penn State offer, and then they get a lot of other offers from regional schools and elsewhere. It was a signal that this guy is actually good. At Iowa State, some of those guys probably stayed under the radar because not everyone's looking at Iowa State.
Sharks don't swim in Iowa. Sharks don't swim in Nebraska. Sharks don't swim in South Dakota. Yes, they used to. So that was all an ocean at one point. It's just anyway. Go on.
Yeah. We need to get into geography later because I am interested in those things. This situation, to me, comes down to the line. I don't have a problem with them bringing in athletes from the secondary, even some of the receivers, the running backs. Like I've made my opinion very clear. I think you need to keep some of these young running backs. I don't think it would be good to just control over and copy and paste everything from the Iowa State offensive skill positions. I think Penn State still has talent advantage on this roster. It's going to be the lines. They had a bunch of seniors on that offensive line. The guys that I thought were Big Ten caliber are moving on. And the guys that are available, I think if they come over, they're going to be very specific in what I think they would fit into for this offensive line. Defensively, they're running a different scheme. So a lot of those guys they're not an easy fit. And I think that's in another area where if Penn State's going to invest in retention, I think they got to invest in the trenches, or else they're going to be in a situation where, at least for me, like there's a lot of unknown. And you're going to be paying a lot in the portal for those positions because those are expensive positions.
That's where the long-term evaluation comes in, right? That's where the practice, this sort of like the equivalency of taking a occupational test, right? How do these guys function? Can these guys hold this new defense, which probably should be a 4-2-5, right? Like regardless of who they bring in,
I imagine so.
Most base defenses now. 4-2-5, where you find that third safety or third corner that can play as a pseudo linebacker safety, the sort of the triumvirate.
It's all about that 11th defender. What is that guy going to be?
And how do these guys handle things mentally? And a lot of these guys are upperclassmen. A lot of these guys have been through it, have the experience to do that, and have changed not so much their offense, but have changed the way that they play, because you evolve and you change your offense every year. You change your defense every year. It's not necessarily a new defense, but you change the way that you adapt to the teams that you're going to play. How do these guys handle those adaptations? How do these guys handle all the changes that take place? So I think that's what you're looking at when you're talking about Iowa State players. Do you get on College Football 26 and this guy's rated in 84 and Iowa State's guy's rated in 80 and, to play the 84, right? Like this, I don't think that's how all this works in real life. It's about figuring out the way that you can best adapt both sets and sort of ingrain your culture into that. And the culture is an important thing here. Rocco Beck's culture fit is just as important as Rocco Beck's ability to, I just stepped in it right now, but his ability to throw a football. Like this is kind of how you look at building that up from year one. And I'm not going to be the guy that looks at that schedule and says this is an advantageous schedule, because we've seen in the last couple of years, you don't know what you're looking at for next year yet, right? You don't know what these teams are going to be. You have an idea of what tier they're going to be around, but at the same time, you don't know what these teams are going to be. But he's got an opportunity to ingrain that culture early, bring in some guys that are his guys. And I think that, any coach would have done or would do the same thing. And coaches that are making these changes are going to do the same things at other programs as well. So I think that's what you're looking at with Penn State's ability to mesh these two rosters, and then of course go outside the portal. And that's kind of where you spend your money. And we had Josh Pate on a couple of weeks ago, and he talked about Iowa State's ability to get these guys to take discounts, right? And I think that there's an ingrained, not hometown discount, because a lot of these guys are Midwest and, from the Ames adjacent area, but there's an implied discount that comes with playing with the guys that you're familiar with. This is not a situation where they're looking to come in and reward them by paying them all $1 million a piece. But you're going to get Iowa State players cheaper than you're going to get other players from the portal that can be contributors right away from any school in the country.
No matter what, they're going to probably be paid more than they were at Iowa State, because
they will be paid more than they were paid at Iowa State. But also, we talk so often, the scheme matters so much in terms of getting yourself to the next level to make the real money. Not that this is anything to scoff about anymore in terms of payment, but making the money that can change your life fundamentally for generations. And that's what matters. You go to a place that does not have a scheme that suits you, all of a sudden you fade off into the darkness. You're an undrafted free agent. So I think that stuff matters in terms of the entire calculus, the entire math of how all this stuff is going to come together.
We're going to be following that. We'll be live tomorrow at 10 a.m. to discuss any news or information that crops up with Greg Pickle. And then, of course, as we mentioned, Fitz and I are going to be coming back on the Transfer Portal show on Friday at 10 a.m. So please join us then. We'll be discussing all of the movement, all the names, recapping what it means for Penn State, which, spoiler alert, it'll be TBD in the moment because we want to be responsible. But, some guys are going to... The loss is going to sting more than others, and we can recap all of that. Plus, any other things going on. I've got to get to some film analysis of a linebacker and a receiver here in the recruiting class. So what I'm saying is there's so much stuff going on from Blue White Illustrated. The season is over, but everything is actually getting faster and heating up from a news perspective. So join us, BlueWhiteIllustrated.com, 50% off right now for the portal search. And of course, you can join us here for free on the Blue White Illustrated YouTube channel. For Sean Fitz, I'm Thomas Rankar. Talk to you tomorrow.